let's do some pre-production for your own video content. And today we'll look at locations and backgrounds. There are a few things to think about when you are planning your video content and where you're going to film it. Usually when you have a business, you have offices or a warehouse or whatever, and you'll want to use that because they reflect what your business is doing. But let me tell you this delightful term that the film industry uses. It's called Mise En Scene. And this basically translates to what is in the frame. So what will people actually see? And even if that is with a depth of field, which makes, your background blurry or not, you need to think about the mise en scène of your framing. And depending on the personality of your brand, you could have a bit of fun with your mise en scène. You could put some Easter eggs in your background, or you could make sure that it's very formal and very proper for your business. It's always best to double check what is in your background just to make sure that it's all appropriate and that nothing is out of place. Like, for example, if you have a monitor that is behind you that is on and in use but has private information on it that shouldn't be shared, although you could blur that, it's probably best not to have it in the background to begin with. Or if you have other staff members that will be coming in and out making noise, or who do that really awkward thing where they start walking in frame and then stop and look, and instead of being natural and just going, they like reverse, it's not going to be great for your video content. So being aware of what's in your background or what's possible to crop up in your background is always very important. If you are worried about having a background or having a consistent background, you can do what like I did and make your own, or find a really blank wall. It'll do the exact same thing and it won't be distracting to what you're talking about either. So now that you've looked at the background of your filming location, have you thought about the noise in your filming location? So if you're doing like I do and you want to do a talking head, audio is going to be incredibly important. So if your office sits on a bus route, or you're filming when the bin lorry is coming round, don't. These things will take away so much of the attention because they are so distracting. The only way you can really get away with that is if you then cut to a shot of a bus, because then it makes sense. But if you're doing a talking head and then a shot of a bus appears, that's really weird as it is. You want your background audio to be as quiet as possible. Now, in some ways, if you're in an offices and you've got quiet murmuring of people talking in the background, but you talking over it kind of mutes that and stops that from becoming prominent, that's fine, because I think that works with the environment you'll be using as your background. But for me, it makes no sense for me to have ambient noise of like birds or phones ringing, because that's not my background. So you really need to think about how the area sounds as well as what's there. So the last thing we need to look at when we're talking location and background is lighting. This is a bit more technical, but you've got to work with what you've got really as well. You can't really help that. If you have office horrible tungsten lights, you're not going to have much of a choice. But if you can use natural lighting, I suggest you do that. You just need to be careful on whether the lighting's going to change throughout your video, because that in itself can be distracting as well. It's still nicer than horrible office lighting, so it can be finicky. If you can look at investing at small LED panels, the kind that influencers use, they can be really helpful, even if they're not whacked up to full brightness. If you use a window and natural light as your main source of light, and then use that just to make sure that any fluctuations don't look really dramatic, it can be really helpful. And it's just like a cheap way to make your video quality ramp up a little bit. You can spend a lot of time and money on getting your background right. A lot of people do, and I think if you're making really consistent video content, don't worry about it at the beginning and very slowly build up how your background's looking. You can just add little bits here and there over time. because really your video content should be about what you're doing and what you're saying, not necessarily about the background. The background's just, you know, aesthetically pleasing. So if you have any more questions on the pre-production of making video content, you can dump them in the comments, or you can drop me a DM, we can jump on a call. But yeah, just let me know, and if there's anything you'd like me to talk about next month, again, drop me a message.